I want to tell you guys a story about how a dream became a reality. And it all starts with one of my favorite Macs of all time, the PowerMac G4 Cube. This incredibly beautiful failure of a product has always captivated my attention, although ironically, I've never actually owned one. That's a future video idea right there. The PowerMac G4 Cube was incredible in its needlessness. There was no reason to make a desktop that was that beautiful, crystal, shining cube, but Apple did it anyway, because that's how Steve Jobs operated, and it failed pretty miserably. But it created an absolutely gorgeous icon of computing history. And last year, when Apple announced the new generation Mac Mini, it gave me an idea. Can you imagine how cool this new, more compact design would look suspended in a cube of clear plexiglass? Well, I wanted to imagine that myself. So I reached out to my friends over at Juicycrumb, Tim and Adrian and John. Could we build a case for the Mac Mini that would be a throwback to the G4 Cube? And could it even be something that we could put on sale so that you guys could go out and buy it? And I'm happy to report that after many months of hard work, we were able to come up with this. So here it is. This is the M4 Cubed, and I'm unbelievably excited to tell you that there's a link in the description below if you want to buy one. So today I want to give you guys some of the backstory. I don't want to just tell you about the product. I want to tell you what it's like to make a physical commercial product like this from scratch. This is not white labeled. This is not hiring somebody in China to do the design work and make it all for you. This was basically done from the ground up through Juicycrumb and our partners. So let's go back in time. Now, neither I nor Juicycrumb have ever built a physical molded product like this before. Over the past couple of years, Juicycrumb's main focus has been on retrofitting. The first time I worked with them was on their 27-inch iMac conversion kit, which allowed you to use the iMac's power button, power supply, and speakers, as well as converting it to a display out. And more recently, they applied that tech to the Sunflower iMac G4, creating a circular logic board that fits in place of the original board and allows that display to function over HDMI out. But this is something totally different. It's a molded plastic piece, and it's not something that we'd ever manufactured before, so we were gonna have to figure that out from scratch. But first, we needed a design. Using the model from Apple's 3D visualization for their different products as a starting point, we were able to mock up a rough outline of what this design might look like. And once we got exact measurements, we were able to make it an exact fit. Now, this all happened many months ago. In fact, before I even moved into this apartment. So let's go back in time and take a look at the first ever prototype. So here it is, the first prototype. It's still got all of the 3D supported structures on it. So let's go ahead and get rid of those, and then we can see how it fits the Mac Mini. So here it is, the 3D printed prototype, and I want to talk you guys through some of the design decisions that we made with this product. The first one was, of course, having those port cutouts on the front. That's a deviation from the G4 Cube, but we kind of thought that in order for this to be a practical accessory, you're gonna want access to the front ports. So we made sure that there's enough clearance for plugs, and to make it look extra nice, we've beveled the edges, which I think is gonna look really cool once this thing is in clear plastic. But then we come around back, where you're gonna notice that the way the Mac Mini sits in here is via this little lip. So we discussed a couple of different ways of doing this. We kind of ruled out dropping the Mac Mini in the top because I didn't want this top piece to be separate, but we had a couple of different systems for mounting it. Number one was having it slide in with a little lip at the back so the Mac Mini would actually sit down inside of this thing a little bit, but what ended up working best was this little lip. So Basically, the inside wall at the top where the Mac Mini is slightly thinner, so when you slide the Mac Mini in, it fits just with friction. And once this thing is in clear plastic, it'll be a lot more seamless. It'll really look like it's floating in there as opposed to having visible support bars. But around the back, we have a couple of more design details I want to draw your attention to. First of all, we've got this big opening here for airflow. So when this thing is on your desk, air can come in the back here. And there's also this slight little divot down here. And that is for airflow as well, because we just wanted to have it as open as possible. So I think it's important to talk about how the design process for something like this went. This first prototype looks pretty similar to what I showed you guys in the reveal video, but it's actually pretty different because this was just designed in 3D software. Tim took the physical dimensions of the Mac Mini itself, and we used that as a basis. We talked about how high this case should be so that we could make sure that it would fit underneath a studio display, because that's where a lot of people are going to use their Mac Mini. And we talked about leaving enough space around the ports and those type of details. But we didn't know how this thing was going to perform when you're actually using the Mac Mini inside of it. Because the undeniable truth about this design is that it is going to be enclosing the Mac Mini and limiting its cooling. The new generation Mac Mini uses a 360-degree vent on its bottom foot for cooling. And that means it generally takes air in from the front of the device and pushes it out the back. And that all works great when it's sitting on a table, but this device is going to be suspended and enclosed in plastic, so we had to figure out how that cooling was going to work. Now, you will have noticed that on this initial prototype, there's a foot cut out at the back that's designed to mimic how the G4 Cube looked, but at this point that was just created based on what we thought would allow cooling to happen. So the first thing I did was fire up Cinebench, both with and without the G4 Cube case, and this yielded some pretty interesting results. You can see very clearly with the case, the temperatures on the Mac Mini were indeed quite a bit higher. And in addition to those higher temperatures, we also saw the score of the device drop overall. The initial prototype case dropped that score to 1230. Now, this is kind of an unrealistic workload, right? Maxing out your CPU for 40 minutes straight. But a drop of 14% is not nothing, and I wanted to see if we could do anything to improve the situation. One of the first methods that I tried was adding little rubber feet to the bottom. This would, in theory, create an air gap around the sides, allowing fresh air in the front of the case and then hot air out the back. However, we quickly learned that the Mac Mini's cooling system is at its best when it's either on a flat surface or completely unobstructed, because the fan doesn't really blow out the back. It sort of blows down and around. It's kind of sort of generally back here, but not very precise. And so what happened when we smoke tested these prototype cases is the air is just sort of blowing around in there with no particular direction. And I ended up finding that the air was just kind of blowing directly into that crossbar that we had put along the back and just circulating within the case. So it was intaking the same exhaust air over and over again. It was just not great. And I was getting confused, so I was like, you know what? Let's try something crazy. Let me chop that off completely. So now the entire back of the Mac Mini was open, and that did have a slight improvement over what we were at before, but it still wasn't super satisfactory. So I sat down with Tim and we started looking at a bunch of different cutout designs that would enhance airflow. The goal was to let hot air flow out on the top of the crossbar, with the bottom section providing intake. And we tried a bunch of these different designs, but what I eventually landed on was this. I think it's the most simple, the most elegant, and it's the most sort of Apple feeling. The radius of the corner of the cutout matches the radius of the corner of the foot opening. That seems logical enough to me. And the initial testing that I did on a 3D printed prototype seemed promising, but we weren't going to know for sure until we got our hands on an actual prototype. So then it came time to actually manufacturing this thing, and we turned to the best. Mac Effects is a company that's been around for a bunch of years, and they specialize in making clear cases for vintage Mac models. So they know the best molding, plastic types, and manufacturing processes to make something like this. So after months of designing and printing and thermal testing and sending in materials to factories overseas, we got our first video of the actual prototype itself. And then a couple days later, I was able to unbox it. So here it is. This is the official clear prototype. This is gonna be the first time that I'm seeing this thing as it's meant to look. And honestly, my heart is beating fast. And of course, Juicycrumb sent in some of their adorable stickers to really complete the experience. The moment of truth, it's time to see this in person for the first time. Oh, I love it so much. Dude, look at this. And this isn't even the final production process. This is 3D printed. It's so perfectly clear. It's honestly hard to see it on camera. This is another really key moment because we want this Mac Mini to fit just right. Let's go ahead and insert it. Oh, look at that. It looks just like a G4 Cube with that little bit of clear plastic visible on the side, that sheen on top, and oh, look at that from the front. This is so cool, dude. I can't believe I'm getting to see this in person for the first time. This is the culmination of months of working on and off to make sure that everything is just right. I've never been able to hold a product that I helped create before. That's amazing. Seeing this thing in the flesh was absolutely incredible, but this is a very expensive prototype. It costs over $600 just for this one unit. So we didn't want to have to make any more revisions. So the first thing that I did was run a thermal test. Here we've got Cinebench running with and without the Mac Mini in the case, and you can see that the temperatures aren't being raised dramatically by having it in the case. And in fact, over 3 runs, this prototype performed just 1% shy of the control test. So a huge relief. Our updated design worked perfectly. I'm so happy about that. And honestly, it was only in retrospect that I started to realize why this design works so well. Because at first I was confused, right? Why would the open back prototype not perform as well as something where the airflow is ostensibly restricted? Well, as it turns out from those smoke tests, what's really going on here is, like I mentioned, as the fan blows down, it creates this high pressure zone underneath the Mac Mini here. So when we put it up on rubber feet, I thought, hey, maybe that'll allow some air to go in the sides and then it would go out the back. But because there's just high pressure, it just is gonna be blowing exhaust air out of those vents. So the problem really was just getting fresh air in. And that's exactly what this crossbar does, because there's now enough space here for that fan, which kind of blows at an angle to exhaust out. And then that creates a negative low pressure zone to bring air in the bottom. So it's not wind tunnel tested or anything like that, but anecdotally, it has majorly improved performance, and I now feel comfortable saying that you can use this thing with an M4 Pro Mac Mini and just use it completely normal. So that catches us up now to about May of this year. We had the design, we had this prototype, but then there came the issue of logistics, because we started working on this project late last year in like October, November, like pretty much a week after the Mac Mini came out is when we started going through this process. But the bigger issue is, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention since, let's say, November of 2024, but there is now a new presidential administration, and that has provided a number of roadblocks. So the first thing, just on a very base level, are the tariffs. No matter what we try to do, there's gonna be a very bare minimum 10% tariff that simply wasn't there when we started working on this project. And obviously, the expenses for making something like this, you'd think it wouldn't be very high because it's just a molded piece of plastic, but because it's specialized and we need like $8,000 worth of tooling to make it, it's not cheap to produce these things, especially in a smaller number, because we have no idea how many people are gonna buy them. But in addition to that, these tariffs coming in at a bare minimum of 10%. But things actually got significantly worse a couple of weeks ago because the Trump administration has ended the de minimis exemption for goods under $800. And this is what allows companies like Shein, AliExpress, and Temu to exist because they ship you a single small package under $800 directly from China. And that means that you didn't have to pay import duties on them. If a company like Apple wants to bring over a whole boat of iPhones, they've always had to pay some amount of import duties. Now there's tariffs on top of that as well, but without the de minimis exemption, because of the way that this is worded, at least for now, I'm sure this will be challenged in court. If I wanted to send you one of these from the factory in China, just to ship it to you, just in import duties, it would cost $80. $80 just to get this thing into the country as one on its own. And that applies both from China, where they're going to be manufactured, and from Australia, where Juicycrumb is based. In fact, Adrian told me that a customer in the US recently had to pay over $200 just in shipping and import duties to get one of their boards into the US. And just a couple of days ago, Australia Post announced that they are just simply stopping shipments to the US altogether. They're just not going to do it because it is too expensive and it's not worth it. Would you pay $80 just to get this thing into the country? I don't think so. So we had to come up with a way to get around this. Now, to be clear, we're still working on the manufacturing of this because, like a lot of, new creation products, we don't have the $30,000 that it would cost to start producing these things until we get orders filled. So we have a Kickstarter in the link in the description down below. But what we're going to end up having to do is splitting the shipments into two groups. Anything that's going to the rest of the world outside of the US can be shipped out of Australia, where Juicycrumb already has the infrastructure to receive stuff, package, and ship it out. But anything going to the US has to be shipped in bulk to me. And then I have to ship it out. So thanks, Trump. Great work. And look, I'm sorry. I try not to get too political on this channel, but this is just stupid. It's bad economic policy. It's dumb. It's pointless. And there's no reason that we should be adding all of this extra bureaucracy, extra steps, just so that, according to the administration's press release, they can stop opiates and fentanyl. That is the dumbest logic I've ever heard in my entire life. What are you talking about? Anyway, all of that is to say that we are still very much working on the pricing for this because the amount of units that we sell will determine the cost to get them. The tariffs could change at any moment. Exemptions, lawsuits, who knows what's going to happen. So as of the time of filming this, I don't know how much we're going to be able to sell this for. All I know is that we're not going to be making a ton of profit because starting something like this on a small volume production is very, very expensive. But at the end of the day, this is a real product. And I just feel so excited and grateful to have been a part of bringing an idea that, frankly, I had all the way back with the Mac Studio in 2022. I was like, that would be really cool. And now it's real. It's a thing that you can buy. This is amazing. So I really hope that you guys will give it a shot. I wish, I hope that we can sell enough of these that we can bring the costs down and that we can really start moving them. So thank you guys so much for being a part of the journey on this channel. It's been 10 years now. It was May, actually, of this year that I hit my 10-year anniversary of making content here on this channel. And I mean, what a ride it has been. And none of it would have been possible without you guys. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this offering. A ton of work and care has gone into this. The Juicycrumb team are absolutely incredible. And, I only played a small role in this, but even that has been so thrilling. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing and supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.